Welcome to the Recovery Lab podcast. We're glad you were able to join us. Recovery Lab hopes to destigmatize addiction and normalize recovery.
Our platform provides an avenue to share the many stories of those that have recovered from addiction, providing for the listener the most basic antidote to addiction. Hope.
All right, everybody, we're back. I'm Drew Hassan.
I'm Daniel Anderson.
We are the Recovery Lab. We are joined today by, if not the oldest friend I have in recovery, Sean Guy. Welcome, brother.
Because I'm still alive.
You're still alive. No, I had the benefit of reflecting back on when I first met you today, looking at old pictures, and maybe at some point throughout, Daniel can put these old pictures up on there. There they are. The one in the middle is, you had to have taken that picture. You had to have been the one taking it.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure I was.
And then just it's almost like from another
era.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The people that we've lost along the way, including Sam the dog.
And Phyllis.
God,
that was such a tragic death.
It was.
I mean, really. And when you called me that day, I went to that website and found the pictures of her house, or what the remnants of it. I mean, my heart just broke. It really did.
Yeah, that was
crazy.
But you mentioned earlier, we had friends named Ann, Chester, and Calvin, who were just interesting people to have known. And I was thinking, I was not, when I met Sean, much older than what your oldest. How old are your older kids?
Well, Nicholas is about to be 30, and he's is that right?
No way.
No. He's getting ready to be 29.
Well, I was younger than he is when I met you, and you were about his age.
I was probably about 20, 28, 29.
You were reeling from the loss of the relationship
with Sarah,
to whom the lady to whom you are now married.
Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy.
Yes.
And I have nothing. I hope that your son gets to meet his own Sean and have his own group of friends that were as interesting and fun and enjoyable to be around. And I've got to tell you, I haven't put it on this phone, but I had a spades game on my phone that would let me change the characters' names. And so in honor of my formative years, it would be you and Ann and Randall, and I would sometimes change it out to have Calvin on there, but he didn't play cards that much.
Well, Lulu, who everybody knows Lulu in this town, or should. Lulu and I would play spades all the time when I was first getting sober. And there was a big group of us, and Lulu and I often talk about, we need people to play a spades game, because I don't know that people even play it much anymore unless you're in jail. For cigarettes.
You got to do something.
Yes.
And it's not as loud as dominoes in there.
The crazy thing about that time period is, I was thinking about this the other day, knowing that I was coming in. And so, the breakup of my marriage, I was, 7 years sober at the time, something like that. And the breakup of my marriage came about as a result of me being in about a 2-year, dry drunk period. I was just not, I was not in constant communication with a sponsor. I'd go to maybe, at best, a meeting a week, sometimes a meeting every 2 weeks. All of my friends were still sober, so I was hanging out with sober people. But I was living like a drunk, and so my best friends like Billy, Wynn, and Greg McNeely and John Hopkins, all these people that were sober with me and gotten sober with me, I had done some things in each of those individual relationships that was like a good alcoholic, in active addiction. And I had done some things to really harm those relationships. And so when Sarah broke up with me, it was like, holy shit, what's going on with me? And, I started seeing Jerry McBride. I don't know if you remember Jerry. Yeah. And he was supposed to be the one that was going to marry us. And I was not Episcopal, and I did not go to church. I quit going to church long before I got sober, unless I had to go, like Mother's Day, Christmas, whatever. And that continued all the way through sobriety and up until this point. And so I started seeing Jerry because he offered once a week, an hour at a time, and that went on for about a year. And at the culmination of that, I told him one day I wanted to start going to church, and of course he asked me why, and I was like, I don't really know. It's just something that I feel inside that I need to do. And he was like, no one's ever said that to me. And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, everybody's always got an answer. And I was like, I really don't have an answer. I just know that it's something that's drawing me to do this. And I felt a real need for that. But it was during that whole year that I was essentially, I was friendless almost. And I mean, not that's a gross exaggeration, but my closest friends, I was not very close to anymore. And in addition to going and kind of leaning towards into the church, I started going to all these meetings, all over town. And I started going back and doing some, trying to get involved and carry the message with newcomers. And that's ultimately where I met you, because you were out at the Village.
That's right.
And I think that's where I first met you. And then who was the guy from the coast whose dad was a urologist?
Brian Carter.
Yeah, where is he now?
Look, Lord only knows. So when I graduated from law school in 2010, and I had just taken the bar, and I went down to the coast, and I was able to get a hold of him, and we hung out, and that is the last I have seen or spoken to. No, I think he is.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, they've got a great recovery community on the coast.
Well, he lived in what's right outside of New Orleans, Harvey, just on the other side of the river.
Going towards Diamond Head or going towards Venice?
The river's so windy. It's just right it's basically New Orleans, but just on the other side of the river.
Oh, yeah, West Bank.
Yeah.
Okay.
He lived over there.
Yeah.
And made a lot of money doing. He's a fishing captain. Like, you pay him and he takes you out to go fishing.
Oh, well, shit! Maybe we should go get a fishing trip with him.
Look, I try every now and then. I am spurred on to try to hunt him down. And Brian Carter, if you're out there, I love you, buddy. Miss you, man.
Me too.
So yeah, Brian and I lived together, and we both got out of the Village in early 96. So you would have been knocking on 8 years.
Yeah, somewhere in there. So, I guess that's when, I met y'all and I started, because I know I was sponsoring you, and I want to say I was sponsoring Brian, but if I wasn't, I was certainly hanging out with y'all. We would go, to meetings. We'd have coffee after or before.
Yes.
We went to Perkins. I love Perkins. It was good.
You could get Eggs Benedict.
Heck yeah. And then, so it was during that time period of my life, it was like this rebirth of who I was as a person. And it was like getting sober all over again. And I can see that. I had all of these, younger people that were, kind of reinvigorating me, if you will. And y'all weren't much younger than me, but it was still, I was developing all these new friendships and going to all of these different meetings. Randall and I befriended each other. Ant and I befriended each other. And through Randall, of course, there's Camp. Camp, he was dating Camp at the time, but we met, Drick, remember?
Yes.
That's Ellen's dad.
Yeah.
And then, obviously with Chester and Calvin, who are, anybody from Jackson for a long time, they all know Calvin.
Yes.
Calvin was a very famous Jacksonian. Of course, he loved to tell you that his grandmother owned Francis Pepper.
He did.
And,
Calvin became such a toxic influence in my life that I really had to stop talking to him and hanging around him. And in hindsight, I look back, poor thing was just poisonous. And
he could be negative.
Oh, could be. And I mean, I've heard these horror stories about, towards the end, he would, we shouldn't speak ill of the dead, but
the crazy thing is I thought he was a hypochondriac, and maybe he was, but ultimately diabetes is what killed him.
Yeah.
Shortly before he passed away, he came into a meeting at Bigglepack, and, he had already lost a leg or, a foot due to diabetes. But he was still, sober and going through the deal. And, he never quit trudging for sure.
He plugged along. He cut his foot using a pumice stone, and he never could get it to heal. And it just ate away at him.
I've got a friend right now who's not in recovery, but doesn't need to be, but similar kind of deal. Diabetes. He got an injury to his foot, and it's been 2 years. It's just been a long process to save the foot. It's a terrible disease for sure.
Such history with all those people, and poor Anne, she fought to the bitter end, and
cancer. Yeah.
If you never got to meet Chester, to all those out there that might be, you're a lesser person, because Chester was quite a funny fellow. Had a cool house.
Very cool. He was an interesting guy. Just everything he had. And then, of course, I sponsored that other guy who I think he's dead, and I always struggle to forget his name. He was from Nashville, the attorney.
So I've got some stories about him.
He lived with Chester for a while.
For a long time.
And Chester kept letting him live there despite the fact that he kept relapsing.
Well, he got money all the time. He had this disability policy that paid him every month.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah. And so he that disability policy was a blessing and a curse, because he got a lot of money.
Now, he died,
guaranteed.
didn't he?
Gary. I don't know. I have no idea whatever happened to him.
Gary. I love the guy. He's a great guy. And his story was just so tragic. Honestly. It's just he's someone that I sometimes share with people that I'm sponsoring, about how quick and devastating this disease can be, because he went from, here he was an attorney, married, kids. He was a closeted, gay man, and grew up in a very religious household. And he's working in this great law firm, making wonderful money, and super intelligent guy, and starts drinking. And within a year, he's smoking crack and loses his law license, loses his family, his kids. Basically homeless in a year's time. And it's just like, we talk about the disease itself being something that we're born with. And I used to laugh when I was in the treatment business, how, you can't be a crack addict unless you smoke crack. It was kind of a inside joke that I would say to some of my people that I worked with. And the point being is that, we may be genetically, predisposed to be an alcoholic, but if we're not drinking, then we're never going to get there. Once he started, and it went fast.
Super fast.
Yeah. And, the disease is crazy how it can activate and really take someone down very quickly.
Well, listen, not everybody has the presence of mind, the fortitude. How have you been able to renew your practice of recovery? Because I know a fair amount about your life, and you've had some things happen while you've been sober that have been difficult.
Yeah, that's funny. I wasn't expecting that question, but I was thinking about that the other day because I was thinking, okay, what are we going to talk about? What kind of stories can I bring? Because I've got a ton of stories. I have a ton of stories from when I was drinking and using that are just honestly, they're funny as shit. But I've got some great stories in recovery that, to a certain extent, are now funny, but at the time they were not.
Certainly weren't.
No.
Well, I think that I tend to want to get out of people, and I think Daniel agrees, how you deal with difficulty. Like, I can tell you, or I can tell everybody, I dealt poorly with my divorce, and I did not do the things that are necessary to deal with those adverse feelings, things that we talked about, I think, before we were recording, how it affects our self-esteem and our worth. And I chose another path. And let me tell you.
Yeah, I mean,
you can certainly ruin your life real quick.
Yeah, I mean, I'll have 3 years, April 11th, and similar to what we were talking about before the show starting, like I'm really struggling with some stuff from my adoption and the fears of abandonment. Like, that's when you were talking about, like, I was just kind of melting down in my seat because
before our show, yeah,
because that's exactly. I've done a lot of work around that to become at peace with everything from my past, but this fear of abandonment keeps popping up and popping up and popping up. And Al-Anon has certainly helped, but yeah, I'm curious from an incredibly selfish standpoint how you push through that. How do you push not only the fears of abandonment, if that's something that you had, but also just trials and tribulations of life? What's your go-to game plan?
Well, that's such a loaded question because I could talk about this honestly forever. I mean, so just to kind of lay somewhat of a foundation for the people that don't know. So I guess, I got sober when I was 19. Or I was thrown into treatment when I was 19, but I had been, I'd gone to treatment at first when I was 17, I think, when I was in high school. But so I got sober at such an early age. So, naturally, if you stay sober, you're going to go through a lot of life's events sober. And that's certainly been the case for me, but I've hit some road detours, if you will, that were very unexpected. I mean, so, we were talking before the show about, how, or maybe after we first started, my current wife and I dated for, 2.5 years, and we were engaged for 6 months back in the early 90s. And so, she was truly the love of my life, and I was heartbroken, devastated when she ended the engagement. And the funny thing is that she was convinced that when she broke off the engagement, she wasn't ending the relationship. But I was convinced she was setting me down softly, right? And so after a few weeks, a month or so, I finally just went to her and I was like, it's over. And so she felt like I rejected her.
Were you trying to push her away so you weren't hurt? Or what was that?
So during that time period, I was like walking on eggshells. It was like I was trying to just do everything to make it right. But my motives were obviously to get the relationship back, and I wasn't getting what I wanted. And I was driving myself nuts. And my sponsor was just like, dude, you need to let this go. And if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. And so I kind of went to her and I was like, look, I'm going to give you the space that you want. I just assumed that she didn't want me at all. Boy, was I wrong. And clearly she and I didn't communicate. But I look back at it now and I think, we could have done things so much differently. We would have been together this whole time. But I believe truthfully that it's part of, looking back, it's part of a larger plan. Not that I believe in predestination, but if you allow things to happen in life, and this is part of the answer to your question, for me, and you get out of the way, wonderful things can happen. It's kind of like when you work the 12 steps, what are we really doing? Well, we're working those steps so that we can remove the barriers that prevent us from receiving God's grace. And so when I went through that breakup with Sarah, I realized I was not really connected to the program, and nor had I been for a number of years. So immediately I did the only thing that I knew, which was what I did in early sobriety. I went to a meeting every day. I started, sponsoring people again. I really started getting back into service work, not just sponsoring people, but, stuff with, creating new meetings and doing things with conventions and making new friends in recovery. But the biggest thing was I just focused on my spiritual growth. I mean, that was kind of what ultimately led me to start going to church at 7-8 years of sobriety. But so fast forward, a few years when I'm getting ready to go to law school, I've quit my job. I was working at Baptist Treatment Center, which is where I'd gone through treatment. And, I was dating my ex-wife at the time, and she calls me the day that I've turned in my resignation. And she's like, "Have you already turned in your resignation?" I'm like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Well, I'm pregnant." And I was like, "Oh shit." I mean, that's a curveball. And so, I mean, we had been dating a few months, and I thought, okay, I love this girl. I'm going to do what I believe is the right thing to do. I prayed about it. I talked to my sponsor about it. I proposed to her. We get married. She had a child from another man, and I ultimately adopted him. He's my oldest, Nick, because I loved him and I wanted him to be a part of it. The fact that I was adopted certainly gave me the ability to do that, because I knew that my parents loved me as their own child, and I loved him as my own child, and I wanted to do that.
You were able to reflect what happened to you.
Yeah, but I still used the recipe for getting sober that I used with Sarah. I used that same recipe. I had a lot of shit on me going to law school. My new bride is pregnant with my, going to be my first biological child. I had a lot of shit on me. And of course I was penniless at the time, because when you go to law school at 30 years of age, I mean, you've got this loss of income, but it was something that I really, really wanted to do. And so, and then I had my daughter a few years after that, but so we're rocking along. And then, maybe I was just sober 20 years, and I found out that my wife was having an affair with one of my best friends that I had helped get sober, and he was going through a lot of stuff. I kind of got a bunch of people in AA to kind of take him in and, overlook some things of his past. And, it was just total betrayal at 20 years of sobriety. And I did the same thing then. As a matter of fact, I was sponsoring a lot of guys at the time, fortunately, and I didn't tell them for like the first 3 months of all of this, because I didn't want them to stop calling me like, "Oh, he's got a lot of shit going on." I wanted them to continue to call me, but clearly I was going to a meeting every day. I was just heartbroken. I was angry. Every emotion that you can imagine I was going through. But I used that same formula that I had used with Sarah, that I had used when I first got sober. It was, a lot of meetings, talking to my sponsor. I kind of look at it as, we talk sometimes in AA about the three-legged stool, or how honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. The three indispensable, spiritual principles. You can't have one without the other. And so if you take one of those away, the stool is going to fall over. Well, I looked at my three-legged stool of recovery as AA, the church, and therapy. And so I kind of used that same model. And, I clearly developed that when I was going through the breakup with Sarah. I had a therapist that I was using at the time, to kind of bounce things off, and the therapist was in recovery. So I was getting the same message from both my therapist and my sponsor, but it was coming from obviously a different approach. One's therapeutic, one is experience, strength, and hope. And then I was getting the spiritual fulfillment, from my priest or the church. And so, that three-legged stool has really been what I've used all along. And so when I went of course, there was a lot of things that went on with my ex-wife, and I don't want to talk, negatively about her, but, there were a lot of things that I found out in a very short period of time. She had been using most of my marriage without my knowledge. She knew that I was sober, so she hid it from me. And I mean, she had really spiraled out of control. And ultimately, she went into treatment. She got sober. We didn't get divorced. I forgave her. That was a long process. But I worked through all of that using that kind of same approach and mentality. And then, of course, the marriage didn't work out. And, we knew that it was best to split ways at that time. And so I went to my therapist at the time and said, look, she goes, what do you want? And I was like, and she's in recovery, and she's been sober I think she got sober in 1977. So, and she was young. She was, like me. And so she's maybe 10 years older than me, but she's been sober a long time, and 40, whatever that is, 46, 7.
A lot.
Yeah. And, but she was like, what do you want? And I go, I just want to be happy. And the crazy thing was when I got sober back in 88, that was all I really wanted. It wasn't, oh, I want to quit drinking and I want to quit doing drugs. I just wanted to feel happy. Because when I was drinking and using, that's what I wanted. I wanted to feel happy, and the drugs and the alcohol and, all the things that went with that lifestyle. I mean, it was all about making me feel happy. And so I just said, I haven't been happy in a long time. And so I just really, I went straight to that same formula. I was seeing her, essentially at that time weekly. I was talking to my sponsor multiple times, during the week, sometimes 2 or 3 times in a day. And one of the things too, he taught me to do when I was going through all that stuff, when I found out my wife was having an affair, was he said to me then, my sponsor, he said, I want you to get 2 to 4 people in AA that are close to you, that you can talk to confidentially and tell them everything, just like you would tell me. And because I'm not going to always be available, and you need some other sounding boards, because if you can't get me, you need to be able to talk to someone. And so that was that was like my inner circle. And so I started using that then and kind of incorporating that into that, that 3-legged stool. And then, so I began doing that as well as I'm going through this divorce. And really the divorce, honestly, was not that bad. Because what I had been through in, what was that? That was 2008, into 2007, 2008. That was when the affair was going on and all of this. And, I would describe it then like taking a snow globe and shaking it up really bad, turning it upside down. And that's how my life felt. It affected my work. It affected everything about me. I was not eating. I was smoking like a chimney. I was just so unhappy in sobriety. I was still going to meetings and talking to my sponsor, but, one of the things that I learned about happiness during that time period was it's like, I'm a firm believer that happiness is a byproduct of doing the next right thing. That's what comes about when, if you want self-esteem, what do?
Esteemable things.
Right. And so that's what my sponsor taught me, 1988 when I asked him that. And so it was kind of like, well, happiness comes when I'm doing the things that I'm supposed to be doing. And all right, so I can create that own happiness regardless of what's going on with me. However, I can certainly create unhappiness, but the thing that I really began to understand is that I was a victim, and that was creating a lot of unhappiness for me. And I'll never forget it because it was during this time period. I called my sponsor one day, and he was like, Sean, you're a victim. but you can't be a victim. And I know exactly where I was. At the time I had a Jeep, and I was driving up the hill from JA, going to my house. And I was on Ridgewood Road. I was driving up that hill, and he says, you may be a victim. He said, you are a victim, but you can't be a victim. And it was like, okay, I got it. I mean, so I'm just using her, that whole event was sucking the happiness out of my life. But I had to be the one responsible for making sure that I was going to be happy. And so when I got divorced, I had learned all of that. And I just reapplied everything. It was like, okay, you got to do the things that you need to do. And honestly, the divorce and looking back, I was like, shit, if I had been through all that other stuff in 2008, 2009, this was going to be a breeze. And honestly, it really was. Now, I made some mistakes, but not too terribly bad. I mean, I really didn't. I never talked shit about, my ex to my children. I didn't do anything to alienate them. I was still going to a ton of meetings. I was still doing everything that I needed to be doing spiritually. And I made it through it really with flying colors. And then my best friend of 25 years that I got sober with dies, Billy. And that was a really hard thing because I spent, the better half of 2015, I was the family liaison. So, Billy and I got sober together in 1988. And I was 2 months sober. I had 2 more months than he did, but he would always remind me, you got 59 days, bitch. And, it's not 2 months. And so that one day was very important to him. And, but Billy and I got sober, and here we were, best of friends. And now I'm getting divorced, and now he's dying. And Billy and I weren't just best friends in AA. I mean, I started making fused glass. And so I had this studio with him and his wife, Mary Ann. And he was dying. And so Billy, so I applied that same principle when I was going through all of that. But Billy wanted me to tell certain friends, you tell them this information, you tell my extended family this information, my direct family this information. And so, I wanted to be there and do something for him, and that's what he wanted me to do. And so I had to do it. And I would go to the doctor with him, or he would send me recordings of the doctor, and then I would type up kind of a text based on what the doctor was saying. And so I knew that it was grim. I mean, that he was probably not going to make it. And I mean, eventually I knew he was not going to make it. And, he wanted hope. We talk about hope. I mean, he wanted everyone that loved him to have this hope. He wanted this positivity in his life. And so I wanted to help him have that. And, because, miracles can happen. I mean, I could be wrong, but I'm listening to the doctors and, I wasn't a rocket scientist, but I certainly can understand what they were saying. And the outlook was certainly grim, but eventually he passed away. And, I was in the middle of a trial in Vicksburg, this huge case that I was representing Entergy at the time, and we were going to trial. It's a big case, and I was in trial for 10 days or something like that, and Billy died in the middle of this. And so, here I was, recently divorced, and my best friend's dying, big case, but everything was okay because I had learned this formula of how to go through big things. And, the truth for me ultimately is this. I have developed a sense of faith that God will take care of me regardless of the outcome. And I've learned it and there's other experiences and stories that I haven't gotten into, but those are some of the big ones, and the adoption obviously is one. We talked about that before the show, and going through and finding out, who my biological family was, and ultimately meeting all of them. It was, there was this huge arc of my life that was going on from 25 years of sobriety to say 30 years of sobriety. Okay. And, I grew more in that window of time than I've ever grown in my sobriety. I learned more about me from 24 years of sobriety to 30, 31 years of sobriety than I had ever learned about me. And I was so grateful and so happy. And this one guy that I was sponsoring, he's been sober about 20 years. We were talking one day, and he said to me, he goes, "Dude, I've never seen you like this." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he was like, "I mean, you literally are the happiest person I've never seen you this way." And it was like, okay, I hadn't really thought about it. But I began to really look at that, and I had changed so much. And I remember going back to my therapist, Lynn, and I said, "Lynn," I said, we were talking just in general about all of this. And she said to me, she said, "Well, you're doing the things that you're supposed to do. I mean, that's what happens." And it was a firm reminder to me that we say it all the time in AA. We say it to newcomers. Hey, this is a journey, not a destination, blah, 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 blah. It's so much lip service that we put to that, but it's so fucking true. And here I was realizing this at 30 years of sobriety, that this really is a constant learning journey. And I said in a meeting the other day, and I meant it completely. I hope I never stop learning, because I don't want to, I'm not going to certainly name anybody, but there's some people that we see in AA meetings that, they're just some old, they're just never going to fucking change. And,
Chester.
They go to meetings, they're just unhappy as fuck. They're complaining. They're trying to control everything in the meeting. It's just, they're miserable as shit. And I think, I don't want to be that motherfucker. I mean, I don't want that kind of sobriety. I mean, you can be very unhappy and be sober. If that's what you want, fine. If you're okay with that, fine. But I don't want that for me, and so, I was just, all of these life events, they have deepened my spirituality. They've deepened my faith. They've broadened my external life, if you will, in the sense that, the person that I was pre-relationship with Sarah in the early 90s, before I even met you, I am not that person anymore. And one of the things when I started seeing Lynn in 2014, really seeing her every day, that's when the divorce came. When I told her I wanted to be happy, one of the things that how do I say this? I just wanted to begin to kind of feel, I wanted to feel normal, so to speak. And she encouraged me to really, continue to do all the things that I was supposed to be doing, but she really helped me be honest with myself, because, I don't give a shit how long you've been sober. If you can't be honest with yourself, you got no hope. Honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. And so those three spiritual principles, they have to be applied. But here I was, and so it was like, okay, I'm applying all of this. I'm doing all of this, and I still had this fear, okay, that, the next shoe was going to drop, so to speak. And so there's a point to all this. So when Sarah and I dated someone in between, a couple people in between the divorce and reconnecting with Sarah. But, Sarah broke up with me because of the person that I was, in 1993, and here, although I was sober 5 years, from 5 years to 7 years, that wasn't a good period of my life. And, I was hurting all these friendships. I was ruining my relationship with my spouse, my fiance. And so I would tell Lynn, I'm like, I'm so afraid that, she's just, that I'm going to revert back to being that person. That was my fear. And Lynn kept saying to me, you're not that person. And I'm like, I am. Because we always, in AA, we're like, oh, well, I'm still an alcoholic. I can go back and do all of those things. And yes, I can, but I am different. And for the first time in my life, I really began to understand that I was different. And I really wasn't that guy from, 25 years earlier. And so when Sarah and I started dating and some things came up, Sarah said to me one day, and it was just really, it was like the bow that I needed.
The affirmation.
She said, you are, out of nowhere, it wasn't anything prompted by me. She said, you really are so different than when we dated all those years ago. And it was like, okay, it's not my therapist just trying to make me feel good. And it's not. And so, earlier when I was talking, and not to point out, you were a little emotional, but that was kind of when I knew, how wonderful this life can be when I simply get the fuck out of the way, stop trying to make it happen, and just live it. And that's different. That's there, how do you not work the program and work the program? That's something we learn, most people learn it in early sobriety, but we still have to continue to live that way. I had to realize that my only changes were going to come ultimately from God. I just needed to do the footwork, and the footwork was continue to, apply that. For me, it was to continue to apply that three-legged stool of God, therapy, and AA. And, Bill Wilson said, he said in all of our literature, AA isn't the only thing that we need. We may need some outside help. And while I don't have, I've had some situational depression, but I don't really have any other additional, mental disorders, but, other than I'm just crazy. But
you're run of the mill, standard crazy.
But I to give you an example of who I was 25 when I was 25 years old and been sober 6 years, I would look at someone that claimed to have a panic attack, like. Those people, what the fuck is that? A panic attack? I was just like, that's bullshit. Well, trust me, when I found out, this was before I found out that my ex-wife had an affair with one of my best friends. It was about a year before I found out she was having this, I don't know if it was a sexting relationship or not, but I uncovered about 300 text messages in a week period with this dude who worked at this restaurant, and I was out of town, and I had never had a panic attack. And I don't know, maybe I was like 18, 19 years sober at the time, but I was taking depositions down in Mobile, and I was going out to eat with a bunch of attorneys after the day of depositions. And so I'm on my computer, and I'm looking at this cell bill, and it was just like, all of a sudden, it was like someone just pulled a curtain over my eyes. And I had minutes to go downstairs and meet these guys. And my heart started racing. I had all this pain. I tried to stand up, and I fell to the floor in a fetal position. And my hands were clawing up. All my fingers were coming just like tight. Anyone that's had a panic attack, I know, knows what I'm talking about. But it felt like when I had taken a bunch of LSD that had a bunch of strychnine in there, when your muscles are like, and the poison's going, you motherfucker. And that's kind of how it felt. And I was like, I thought to myself, I'm having a heart attack. That's what I thought, and because I had never had a panic attack, and I was like, man, I've got to get downstairs, and I forced myself to get up, and I'm like, well, I'm having trouble walking to the elevator, and I'm having trouble standing. My heart's still, running. I get down to the lobby, and this attorney who's not in recovery, he looks at me and he's like, "Dude, are you okay?" And I'm like, "What?" He goes, "I mean, you're like ashen white." And and so, they brought me some water and they sat me down and they wanted to call an ambulance. And I was like, I don't want to have to tell anybody what was going on.
Yeah.
So I was like, no. I'm much better. I'm much better. And so the next day I was driving home from Mobile.
How long did that panic attack last?
I mean, that was going on for, the symptoms certainly decreased, but the overwhelming, initial onset was just, debilitating. And, The Sopranos is one of my favorite shows, and Tony started dealing with panic attacks, and it was kind of like, I made this connection, like, this is kind of like what Tony was going through, the character. And so the next day I'm driving home and I'm on the phone with Billy, and I'm driving down driving up 49. And I'm telling him what happened. And while I'm telling him what happened, I'm having another panic attack. And Billy's like, I drive fast, but he's like, "Motherfucker, pull over," And I'm like, I'm fine. He's like, "God damn it, pull over." And so I pulled over on the side of the road, and it just increased. And so I got off the phone with him, and I called a high school, friend of mine who's a doctor. He's just a GP, but I called him, and he said, "Dude, you're having a classic panic attack." And I'm like, and so I went and saw him, and he put me on some, Lexapro at the time, but I had never taken medication at the time. And so the point of all of that's a long story to say, I went from this guy who didn't believe in external help, whether it's,
pharmacological or
therapeutic or whatever, it was like, oh, AA is all you need, to, no, I needed some church, and no, I needed some therapy, and no, I needed some pharmacological help in the, and it was, and so I became really, I totally changed my whole outlook on all of that. And ultimately, I think it's what has allowed me to go through things like my adoption, to go through things like the divorce, your best friend cheating on your wife, and all the things that went through that, that were, there was really some crazy things. I'm not going to talk about it publicly, but it was so overwhelming. But to go through all of that, it developed a faith inside of me that really, honestly, is truthfully, I feel like unbreakable. There is no way I could have gotten here without God's grace. And, when you first asked me the question, coming all the way roundabout, you first asked me the question, how do you get through these big things? Honestly, it's like the small shit is what trips me up, right? It's the, somebody spills some milk or spills a drink in your car or whatever, not necessarily alcohol, but, their Diet Coke or whatever, and you're like, "God damn motherfucker,
just washed it."
Right. I just made up this bed, I just folded all these clothes, or, I just cleaned the whole house. What are you doing? Who left this wrapper? It's that kind of small shit that can sometimes trip me up, but it's like when the big stuff hits, I know this is beyond my control, right? I've gotten much better at thinking I can control all the little things, and so I'm not that bad anymore. But the big things I've always kind of just intuitively known, okay, it's kind of like when I got sober. I knew I was an alcoholic and a drug addict, and there was never going to be a chance for me to control that. And, the truth was that I never wanted to control it. When I had to control it, I was fucking pissed. And I just wanted to use the way I wanted to use. And I've always known if I have a relapse, just a glass of wine, I'd be like, fuck it, man. I'm going to take some LSD. I'm going to do some coke.
Definitely need some cocaine.
Yeah. Ecstasy, some pills. I mean, you know, I hadn't
The
tried
whole shebang bang.
and there's some new shit out there that I hadn't tried. You know, and then my kids, I mean, they were having my kids now. I mean, they're having friends die from fentanyl overdoses from just taking what they thought was a Xanax or a Percocet that was a fraudulent pill. And John Hopkins and I were talking not long ago, and I was like, motherfucker, I mean, I would be dead. I mean, he had a son who, smoked some shit out of a weed pen, and it was causing people to have these psychotic episodes. And it was the chemicals that were in the weed pen, and it was THC with 85%, as opposed to, you know, when I was drinking and using, it was like 5% or something, you know, something.
That old dirt Mexican weed.
The skunk weed, right?
Skunk. With the stems and the seeds.
I'd smoke the stems and the seeds all day long.
In a pinch, they work.
And you know, but I would definitely be dead. No question, I would be dead.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm so grateful to be alive today, and you know, I ultimately attribute all of it to really, in terms of the work that I've done, I attribute most of my sobriety because of my honesty with me. I mean, not honesty with you. I mean, that's important. But if I can't be honest with me, I have no hope of getting sober or getting, even if I'm sober, getting through things that trip me up. I mean, if I can't see my role and I'm not willing to accept my role, and that can only come from honesty, I mean, I'm fucked. I'm going to do a lot of damage. And as a matter of fact, my sponsor told me, I think this was, it was a few years back. And he unfortunately, I've had the same sponsor, which is crazy, since I got sober. I mean, he's got 39 years of sobriety, and he's in his 70s now. He was 40 when I got sober. So he's about 20 years older than me, and he's been able to see me through that whole time period. I mean, it's crazy that neither one of us have gotten drunk, and two, we're both still alive. I mean, that's just a rarity. And but he knows me better than I know myself. And he said to me, he goes, it was very unexpected, and I appreciated the compliment, if you will. I mean, he said, "You're probably the most honest person that I sponsor in terms of who you are."
Being willing to own those things about yourself.
Yeah. I mean, not in the sense of, oh, I'm the worst person in the world, but really saying, okay.
I do play a part in these things.
Yes. When I talk about honesty or inventories, like in a meeting, sometimes I'll use the expression, it's like a warm blanket, because when I can start being honest about what's going on, in here, in me, that's when I know that the solution is coming. It's like, okay.
I think that's a blessing, though, that you've got, because not everybody sees it that way. I think it's often, maybe too often, the case that people make that realization, and it's just too uncomfortable. It's too scary, too whatever. And people, I mean, that's a good thing that you've got the warm blanket.
Yeah. I mean, obviously it's frightful. I mean, to look at all that shit, to go through it. I mean, one of my childhood best friends that I used with, he died from this disease. I eulogized him at his service. And he died on a park bench outside of a treatment center. And it was like his, 15th, 20th treatment center. He could never get more than a year. It's still heartbreaking. Because he had the same disease. And, he was homeless at one point. He had a college degree, he was married, child, working, and he lost all of that. And I picked him up one night. He was homeless, panhandling for change down on High Street. and it was pouring down rain. I picked him up. I was getting gas, and I saw him at the gas station, and I was like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And I mean, I knew what he was doing, but I was like, "Get in the car," and so I was like, "You look like you hadn't, he needed to eat more than a few biscuits." I was like, I'm taking you. I went to the Wendy's right next door and got him some food, and ultimately I put him in a hotel. He make the story short. I started talking to him, and I was like, because I was so curious. I was like, do you have any trouble believing that you're an alcoholic and a drug addict? He was like, no. I mean, I know that I am completely beat, that I have no ability to control it. I'm like, I mean, because he was so close to me growing up and we used together and all that, I mean, I could be completely direct and honest with him. And I was like, well, why do you keep going back to it? And he said to me, sometimes the pain just gets too great and I say, fuck it. And I understood it at the time in the sense that, okay, he's lost his child. I mean, she's still alive, but I mean, he had lost custody of her. He was homeless. I mean, he had a lot of consequences from his using. And so I understood that. I really abhor the idea that people have to die for me to stay sober. I don't think God works that way. I don't think God says, we're rolling the dice today and this motherfucker's going to die so that he can stay sober. First of all, I'm not that special. And two, I just don't think God works that way. Not for me, he doesn't. I mean, maybe someone else, if that's the way you want to believe, fine. But I just can't see God working that way. But so here he is, it's like the disease is killing him, and he just would say, fuck it. I mean, yes. So, I mean, the point is that he looks at all of that, and it really helped me to know that I just have to be willing to work through whatever it may be, no matter how painful it will be, and that God will take care of me. And the last thing I'll say about this is, so the night that I got confirmation that my ex was having an affair with this guy who is no longer alive, but I mean, it happened at like midnight. He died.
He died?
Yeah. He overdosed.
No shit.
Yeah, he's dead. So, but I found out at like 12 at night, and she finally admitted to it. And so I'm bawling, crying. I'm on the phone with Billy, and I didn't want to call my sponsor at midnight. And so the next morning, it's like 7:30. It was a Sunday, and I'm sitting out on the back porch, smoking a cigarette, bawling, crying. I call my sponsor. And I mean, this isn't even 12 hours old. Okay. And so I'm dumping all of this on my sponsor at the time. And John said to me, I tell him all the time, I was like, the balls of steel that you had to say this to me was just incredible. But it was, honestly, it was life-saving for me. He said to me, he said, Sean, I know you're hurting, and what you're going through is extremely painful, and it's going to take a long time. And I'm not blaming you for your wife's actions, but you played a role in the creation of a situation that gave her the belief that having an affair was a solution. I mean,
it does take some big balls.
I mean, and so, but you know what? And I was just like, I mean, I was stunned when he said it to me, but I knew that he was 100% correct. And he said, your only way out of this is to look at your role and your role only. and ultimately, it led to a number of conversations. So I'm going to kind of speak in, a summary form, but it was like, I had to look at it like, regardless of whether the marriage works out or the family stays together or any of that, if I want any chance to have happiness in my life, I've got to make sure that I never create an environment where someone that I'm in a relationship with would do that. Now, that doesn't mean that they won't, but all I can do is work on me. And I knew that I had participated in a lot of fights, arguments. I didn't know at the time. I had not started going to Al-Anon. We hadn't even gotten into that. But, it was about 3 years after that conversation that I started going to Al-Anon. But I had a lot of codependency issues. And that created a lot of, problems in the marriage. I was still wrestling with that idea that I could control, I could fix. I mean, we've talked earlier about that fear of abandonment, I'm going to fix it. I'm going to control it. I'm going to make this relationship.
To validate myself.
Fuck yeah. To make me feel good about me. And I can't believe I left Al-Anon out, because that arc that I was talking about, and Danny, because you've been to some Al-Anon meetings with me. It really helped me get there, because I just never really understood how much I depended on other people to make me okay. And this belief that I had deep down inside of me that I could fix it. And it was in that marriage with my ex that got me to that point of finally saying, shit, I can't fix this, because she had been sober a couple of years, going to meetings, had a sponsor, all that kind of stuff. We had, we decided to stay together. I'd forgiven her and all that. So we're rocking along, and I became convinced that she was using again. I'm sure if she's listening, she's going to say she's not, and maybe she wasn't, but I was convinced that she was. And so I was driving down to Bass Pro Shops to go buy about $1,500 worth of game cameras that I'm going to secretly put up, in the storage room, out back behind the storage room, and, in her closet, because I was going to catch her smoking weed. I was convinced she was smoking weed. And I was in my car driving down there, and I was like, what the fuck are you doing? I think I've told you this, Danny. It was like, you're going to spend all of this money to catch her using? And when you get that information, what are you going to do with it? It was like,
see, I told you, like, what is that going to achieve? Like, I do the exact same thing. Like, even today, like, I can.
Yes. And so that was when I stopped. I called a dear friend of mine who, Helen Ridgway, who is a longtime. She used to live here. Everyone in the recovery community knew her, but she was a big Al-Anoner. She lives out in San Antonio now. But I called her and I was like, "Where can I go?" And I went that night to my first Al-Anon meeting, and it was like, I should have come here, years ago, and I didn't. But it took what it took for me to finally realize I cannot fix any of this.
Yeah, I was, and also for me, it was like the fact that I was full of pride that no person is going to be able to affect me negatively with my emotions. And I put on this great show that I am a strong man. Like, no female is going to hurt me. Like, nothing is stoic. Nothing is ever going to affect me. And I go to Al-Anon, and I go for the 6 meetings or whatever, and then continue to go after that. And I started to realize, like, there are parts of me that are just a very, very insecure child. And I have been pushing those parts away because I didn't want to appear weak. And so going to Al-Anon has really helped me to become more at peace with those parts of me that I can honestly be a little bit ashamed about, like insecurity. I don't want to be seen as someone who's insecure. I don't want to be seen as someone who's weak. Like
Right.
that's not me. But the reality of the situation is that can be me sometimes. So it takes it. I need every avenue of recovery in my life in order to not, be a just a horrible tornado in other people's lives and in my own.
And it's also helped me to, it's helped me to be a really good ex-husband. In the sense that, she's had her issues, and that's her journey and that's her. But I don't judge her for that. And that's a pot calling the kettle black, right? But I can detach, and I can say that's not me, and I don't have to respond to things that she does. That's, because that's my role, right? She went to treatment a couple of years ago or a year and a half ago, and my children, without any education from me, or any pushing from me, they were hurting, and I could see that. And so I didn't say anything like, hate on your mom. I said, y'all need to come to Al-Anon. And my youngest two, or my oldest was in the Marines at the time, but he's still in the Marines, but my younger two, they started coming to Al-Anon with me. And, as you know, you've met my son.
Mm-hmm.
You may have met my daughter, but my son started chairing Al-Anon meetings.
Yeah.
And really, to watch him grow through that process and understand at such an early age things that took me, shit.
And he always has good things to say. Like it's just like, he's open and honest about his life, and like I get a lot out of what he says when he's there. I really, really do, because he's raw and honest and vulnerable and open, and he's one of the, when he's there, I always perk up because he's always got great shit to say.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate you saying that. When in regards to my children, the one thing that I've always tried to do is be very honest. And if I played a role in helping Parker know that honesty is the best
ticket.
Yeah, exactly. That just fills my heart, because I want them, to know that the best way through any situation is to look at yourself, not the other person, because as we all know, victims don't recover. You can't. Nowhere in the 12 steps does it tell us what did the other person do and how are we going to fix that shit. It's all about you. Step one, we're taking an inventory. That's an inventory. Step two, we're really taking a spiritual inventory. 3, we're turning everything over to God. We're nowhere in there are we taking someone else's inventory, fixing them. And of course, when we get
making sure she does right or whatever.
When we get into 4, when we quote unquote take their inventory in the resentment list, what's the 4th column? It brings it right back to us.
Mm-hmm.
What did you do? And so, then when we get into the inventory of 6, it's about us, not them. And what are our problems and character defects and flaws, and where were we wrong? And of course, we're giving that to God. And when we get into 8, we're taught, when we go make those 9 step amends, we don't say anything about them. I'll never forget when I was in early sobriety, and I was, 2-3 years sober, and I was in college and trying to finish college. I was dependent on my dad for money, and he and I could get in huge fights about money. And my dad would always, he who has the gold rules. That's the gold. That's the golden rule. It would fucking send me into orbit. And I was just like, I'm dying over here, because I was going. At that time in my life, I was working full time. My parents made me pay for my living if I wanted to live outside the house. So I was working 40 hours a week, taking 15 hours in school, going to a meeting every day, and I was penniless, right? And so I would go to Dad, and he would, just didn't want to give me the money, and he had the money to give it to me. And I would get so pissed, and we'd get in this huge fight, and I'd call my sponsor, and he would be like, you got to go make amends. And so I remember the first time I go make amends, my dad makes some comment. He's like, well, I'm glad you see the error of your ways. And it was like, the subsequent fights when I would have to go make amends, I knew he was going to say some stupid shit like that. And I would say to my sponsor, he's going to say this. You don't know that? I know he's going to say this. And he's like, then you keep your mouth shut and you let him say it. And I'm like, that's not right. And, and he's like, I don't care. You go in there and you say your part. And I would, and he would say some stupid shit like that. And it would just, but I bit my tongue and I let him be. And I just focused on me. So, 8 and 9, nowhere in there are we making the other person see their shit. And so, when we look at the steps in totality, it's always about us. And it goes back to what my sponsor said that day when I was sitting on those steps smoking. My only way out of this big situation was to take a look at me, not take a look at her. And it was so easy to, sometimes when we say, oh, we're venting, oh, I need to vent, when I'm venting, there's no inventory taken of me. It's that motherfucker and blah, 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 and I'm yelling at the top of my lungs. Now, it's better to do that with someone other than the person I'm upset with, so sometimes I need to vent with my sponsor, but, my sponsor's going to tell me, I'm tired of listening to all that. Stop it. And, I have to stop it at that point. And then he makes me come back to me and, look at me. And so it always does really come back to that honesty. And really the willingness for me and part of that three-legged stool, the willingness is I know what I'm capable of being. I know that if I go back out and use, I know what I'm capable of doing. I know what I'm capable of doing even in sobriety. All those relationships that I screwed up when I was, 6, 7 years sober, I mended all of those, but I had amends to make. I had amends to make to John and Billy and Greg. And, these were my closest friends. And those relationships were restored, but I can do some real damage in sobriety. So I just know what I'm capable of, and I'm willing to do what it takes because I don't want to ever go back there again. And, the other part of willingness for me, and, we hear this expression, stick around till the miracle happens. Well, for me, what that meant was I had to get to the part in the 9th step where the promises start coming true. And I had this my spiritual awakening came during the middle of the 9th step. And it was like, okay, I'm getting some real benefit out of sobriety and I'm changing. And that God-shaped hole is filling up, and I'm finding some genuine peace and serenity. And it was because I was, making these amends. And, you start making amends and you're getting into the shit, right?
Right.
You're getting benefits from that. And it was like, okay, I'm no longer staying sober because I'm running from prison, which was a real possibility for me, and I should have probably gone. I'm not staying sober because of what will happen if I relapse. I'm staying sober because I want the good things in life. And so all of these events that we've kind of touched on, or I've touched on, they've solidified for me where I don't want to be and where I don't want to go and how I want to continue to grow. And, looking back at this last little major change in my life of who I was as a person. And what does that mean? I'll give you one. So what that means for me is, a lot of times when you tell someone to go do something for somebody, you don't really want to do it, but you just do it anyway. My sponsor made me, dry, fold clothes for my roommates in early sobriety, and not tell them. And so I didn't really want to do that, but, I've gotten to a point in my life now where I genuinely want to fold my kids' clothes and take them and put them on their bed, or, go fill their car up with gas, or, do something nice for my wife. We're not talking, I'm not, just maybe go and do something that she normally does and do it for her. And I do that because I genuinely want to do that. And that's been the real change that I've seen over me as a person is just the level of genuine care that I'm doing. And I'm not doing it for any ulterior motive. I mean, it's really because I want to. And when I realized that had changed in me, it was like, okay, I want more of that. So that willingness continues to evolve as I stay sober and live and grow up. I mean, I just don't believe today at 55 years of age, being sober 36 years, I just do not believe that this is the end. And if I don't want it to be the end.
New horizons.
Yeah.
New frontiers.
No doubt.
Personal development.
We are
way over time.
No. We're okay, but we do need to start thinking about the final questions.
What do you do poorly in your recovery?
Oh, geez. Well, you got to ask me that. I mean, it's like a damn interview. It's changed over the years. It really has. I used to be a terrible sponsor. And there's some, I hope I was at least good with you.
I was going to say,
what the fuck are you talking about? Like, I can't see you being a bad sponsor. Like,
well, sometimes
is that based in reality?
Yeah, it is. I mean, sometimes I would, I was too busy, and I just didn't devote enough time. I've made some mistakes being a sponsor, like I allowed.
You told that one guy to go get high.
I will tell a sponsor, go fucking drink. I mean,
get on it, man.
Do some research.
I mean, I will. I mean, this. I mean, this is life or death. I mean, you think you're not sober. I mean, you're not an alcoholic. Go try it, buddy.
Get on it.
But no, I mean, for example, I let somebody hire me, and I just kept telling them, no. Oh, it's no big deal. I just need you to do this one little legal thing for me. And I mean, I told him no for, I swear, 2 months. And I talked to my sponsor about it, and I just did not want to do it. And I had never done it. I just knew it was wrong, and I finally agreed to it. And boy, that blew up in my face. And then this guy went to go make an amend to somebody, and he basically made him pay him a bunch of money. And I mean, his sponsor, the other guy was in recovery, and his sponsor called me, and I'm like, so I went to him. I was like, I'm firing you as a client. And of course he obviously fired me as a sponsor. And so I'm never going to cross that bridge. I've gotten too close too, in terms of friendships with some people that I've sponsored. And, I love all the people that I sponsor. I genuinely do. But I do try and keep the sponsor
healthy boundaries.
Yeah, not in the sense that I'm superior or over them, because I do not believe that. I mean, we are total equals.
Yeah, we're just one bad decision away from being right back there.
I mean, they help me. They help me more than I help them. Honestly, right. I really do look at it that way, and that's not me just saying that. I mean, I genuinely believe that. But I'm just not inviting sponsees to come over and have dinner with me and the missus, because I've crossed that line to the point where the relationship became unhealthy, and like my ability to
objectively view,
well, or even to confront them, was thwarted by the fact that we had this friendship, right? And it was like they were resistant to me being honest with them, like, fuck you, it was like, I'm being your sponsor, and it was like, I had to really take a look at that. And so I've gotten significantly better as a sponsor. But what do I do poorly? I feel like sometimes the thing that I do the worst today is maybe this is just me beating myself up, but sometimes I just feel like I'm not as welcoming with the newcomer anymore. But I know that I am. And so maybe it's just internally I don't feel like I'm doing enough. Like, I mean, like right now, I don't have any sponsees that I'm taking through the steps. I've got a ton of sponsees, but I don't have any. I gave my number out to somebody yesterday, and I really hope he calls me. I don't know if he has a sponsor or not, but just going up to the newcomer at a meeting, whether or not I'm going to be their sponsor, and I just, because it's so easy for me, because I know so many people in recovery that, the meeting is over and I'm shooting the shit with John and Jane or whatever. And, we're hugging it out. And, I just need to be better at that. So that's one thing I don't do great. The other thing I probably don't do as good as I used to, and I really hate to even say this, is I don't read my meditation book the way that I used to. I read it this morning. And I am not a reflections guy. I'm a 24-hour-a-day guy and always will be. But I read it this morning, and it was so good. It actually had one of my favorite quotes in all of recovery, and that is, "Wear the world like a loose garment." That was the prayer for the day.
Well, look, let's end on a high note. What do you do well in recovery?
Okay. And I'm going to answer this truthfully, and I don't mean this egotistically. I believe that the thing that I do the best of in recovery is when I share, I am completely honest about my life, in the sense that I don't want any newcomer, or any old timer for that matter, walking out of that door after I've shared, believing that life is just some bed of roses once you get sober, because that's not.
It's not.
It is not reality. And so, I share with the full intent of laying it out there. Now, do I get into details? No. I'm not getting it. I've gotten into some details about my ex-wife and this guy having an affair, but I never even said that in meetings when I was going through it. I didn't tell anyone. I mean, as a matter of fact, there was this one lady who's been sober for a long time. She leaned over to a group of ladies that she sponsors. She's passed away now, but she leaned over in one of those meetings that I was sharing, just, kind of emotions on my sleeve. And she goes, "He relapsed and didn't tell anybody." And, when I told my sponsor, he was like, "You're going to confront her." And, she was kind of known for, really
stirring shit up.
Oh, big time. And, he had told Phil Cook, because he sponsors Phil, he had told Phil, you need to go get in her, face about something she had done to him. And so I was like, "Hold on, John.
Easy, Tiger."
I was like, I don't know that I need to go say something to her. And so I was like, "Let's just sleep on this. We'll talk tomorrow." Well, the next day he's like, "I'm really glad you didn't follow my advice and you didn't say anything to her." But the point is that, I just want to make sure that people know that when life shows up at your doorstep, that you can stay sober through that.
And benefit therefrom.
Right. And here's why. And let me give you why I've always wanted to do that. When I was a year and a half sober, I went to Far Out, Way Out. I call it Far Out now, but at the time, Way Out was a very different meeting. It was a lot like Beagle Pack is. It was an older meeting, working people, people with kids. So very different demographic than it is now. But there was this guy in there, and he was sober 16 years, and I'll never forget it. And about a week before this guy relapses, there's this girl in there, and he was Joe AA. And she was sharing, I don't even know who she was, but she was sharing, and she was talking about, "I'm this, and I'm hurting, and he spoke up in the meeting, and he goes, "You're never going to stay sober if you keep using the word I. This is a we program." And he just chastised this woman, in an angry way. And I was just like, I mean, it was so troubling to me. I called my sponsor after the meeting and I was just like, what the fuck? And, he was like, and then the next week that guy relapsed. I mean, and it was just like, I don't ever want to be the guy in AA that has all the answers and is telling people in AA how wonderful life is. I mean, life is wonderful. Don't get me wrong. It is, and it is great. But I mean, sometimes life shows up at your door and that has nothing to do with whether or not you're working the program or whether you're happy. And what are you going to do when that happens? It's a situation of you may be a victim, but you can't be a victim. And so that's the thing that I think I do the best of is relating my personal life with the 12 steps and sharing my experience, strength, and hope.
Transparency.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
But I can honestly say I could do this forever. I mean, not just about talking about me, but just, I mean, I love what you guys are doing. I mean, I really do.
I wish we had another hour and a half to just sit here and talk to you.
I tell you what, maybe you should start your own podcast.
Well, I know you've talked to me about that.
Yeah. Your buddy has one.
Fun guy.
Judge Walker and David Bridges.
Oh,
they'll be here at 5:30 today. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yep.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I want to say I might be I think I'm going to be a guest on theirs.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ask me that or did
No, I think Dave said he talked to you, but y'all haven't ironed out a date yet.
Yeah, that's right. He did talk to me. He came by to see Bonnie. Bonnie and I have talked about having a podcast.
I know. I keep on hearing you talking about it.
Don't talk about it.
I don't see any action.
Well, here's the thing is that I do want to talk about recovery, but I don't want to just have a podcast about recovery. I mean, you guys are doing that. I don't want to do. I mean,
so it doesn't have to be about recovery.
Well, right. I know, and so I've really struggled with what is it that I want to talk about. I mean, there's so many things out there in life that I do have opinions on that are based on my life in recovery. Right. I mean, you see shit out there all the time, whether it's
the wokies.
Well, I mean, whether it's political bullshit, whether it's, religious bullshit,
cultural,
cultural, whatever. And all of my viewpoints on all of those life things that happen to each and every one of us is so altered and affected by my recovery today. And to me, that's a benefit that I've honestly never really, I've just not really gone to. And I told you earlier, I have a lot of stories and I didn't get into even probably 100th of the stories that I have. But I mean, someone told me the other day, I was sharing some stuff. I went skiing a couple of weeks ago with a bunch of guys in sobriety. And one of the guys was like, man, you need to write a book. And I was like, I know. And he's not the first person that's told me that. But I'm like, no, first of all, no one would ever buy my book.
Bullshit.
But I do think in a podcast kind of way, it would give me the ability to kind of really talk about some of those life events and how that's made me a better person. And maybe we can end on this because I remember this like it happened yesterday. And I know exactly where I was. I was in Kathy Cottage.
Mm-hmm.
Were you in Kathy Cottage?
Yeah. Well, it was girls when I was there.
Okay. Well, I was in Kathy Cottage and I called my sponsor. I'd gotten his number from the Living Sober group, and I picked him to be my sponsor for all the wrong reasons. He went to Ole Miss. He was a stockbroker, blah, blah, blah. I mean, he did share some good stuff, but, I mean, God works for us when we can't do for ourselves, right? But I called him, and so my very first conversation with him, he goes, Sean, I'm happy to be your sponsor. I think I was his second sponsor. His first was Brad Buchanan. Brad's been sober forever. And he goes, but, my job is to share my experience, strength, and hope with you and help you work the steps so that you can become a productive member of society. And here I was 19 years of age, and I'm like, what does this mean? And he's like, I'm not going to call you. It's your job to call me. And, boy, that filled me with fear. But the point was that he told me, I'm going to help you become a productive member of society. And as I've gone through in my years of sobriety, he's encouraged me to be on, nonprofit boards, which I've done. I'm only on one board now, but I've recently got off. I used to be on the board of National Council of Alcoholism. I'm past president. I was on the board of Harbor House, and I served on those boards for a long time. I'm on a different board now, but it's about, being that productive member of society. I usher at church, which is a small because but it's kind of no different than putting up chairs.
It feeds you, though.
Yeah, absolutely. And it helps me be because, our life is not just recovery. And I don't think it's meant, I don't think that's when we get sober that we're only supposed to be in AA. I still got to be a father, I got to be a lawyer, to my clients. I've got to be, a husband to my wife, a son to my parents. All those hats that we wear in the relationships with the people that are in our circle, those people aren't all in recovery. And I've coached youth sports, and, how have I been an effective tool of carrying God's grace in all of those relationships? And so, I do feel like there's a story for me to tell, and I want to tell it. I just hadn't figured out how.
You'll get there.
Yeah.
It'll come to you.
And I'll be here when it's ready to go.
Well, I hope you, I've told you this, and I mean it. I want you to keep pushing me.
Okay.
Because, sometimes I just
need a little nagging.
I need a little kick in the ass.
All right.
Well, look, I think we're crunched here.
We are. Sean, thank you.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you, brother.
All right. Good
All right.
deal.
We'll see you next week, guys.
Yeah.